Okay, everyone. I wanted to come up with part two of deductive reasoning. And again, now I'm discussing hints in addition to how to solve the clues. But this is kind of a follow up to the last couple of videos that I did. In the first part of this deductive reasoning series, I proved to you that Forrest Fenn told us that just the words beginning where warm waters halt and somewhere north of Santa Fe is not enough information to figure out where warm waters halt. You pretty much have to use every clue based on what Forrest Fenn told us. This is only a small sample of Forrest Fenn quotes. There's probably easily 20 of them just related to where warm water salts that pretty much reiterate the same thing. You have to use the clues to figure out the starting point, which is exactly what I do in my solve. So if you read these here, the first clue in the poem is begin at where warm water salt. That's the first clue. If you can't figure that clue out, you don't have anything. But remember what I just told you in part one of this, you can't figure that out by looking at a map. You have to use the other clues. The second one, what surprises me is that so many people ignore the first clue in the poem. Without it, all the searcher has the memory of a nice vacation. Although many have tried, I doubt that anyone will find a blaze before they figured out the first clue. To me, that's just expensive folly. You have to use the poem to figure out where to start, just like T. Eliot said, so that you can solve using all 9 clues the location of where warm waters halt. Once you have that, you can then follow the poem from that location and it'll take you precisely to the treasure chest. Those who solve the first clue are more than halfway to the treasure, metaphorically speaking. So, in other words, if you get to where warm water salts, you're halfway there. He has said something similar to that before. One of the interviews at one point asked him, Forrest, what about the home of Brown? And Forrest Fenn said, if I told you where that was, you'd walk right to it. So what he's telling you basically there is that once you get to the point where you're out, your boots on the ground, okay, you're below the home of Brown, which is where we're putting in. So we're not going to where warm water salt. We're not walking down a canyon. That's not the way the poem is written. That's not the way Forrest wrote it. And this is an interesting one. This is from 2014. It was one of Jenny's questions, and somebody asked basically how close somebody was, the closest person to the treasure chest. This was 2014, which is interesting because that's when Sam Smith and his wife went to the wheel. Now remember, Sam Smith, since 2013, has been talking about the wheel. He is the person who made that information public, and he discovered that with a partner of his. And then eventually he partnered with me. What I added to this was I figured out how the poem works and how it takes us to a precise location. So Sam and I, when we sent our partner out the first time in June of 2020, we did not send him to the right place. And I told Forrest a list of other places we were going, and the number 2 place was Five Springs. And the reason why for that is that we wanted to go to Sam's locations first, number 1. And number 2, although I had Five Springs, I did not have the exact location nailed down. So we'll go get Sam's stuff out of the way. At this point, our feeling was that there are people searching near the wheel, but nobody's close. And there's a lot of information that we didn't tell them, all the stuff that I'm exposing to you now. So that was our thought. And unfortunately, it was a major mistake. That's all hindsight. Hindsight's 2020. As far as I know, the closest person to the treasure was a man. Now, they're not talking about Dow, and he's not talking about a woman, but he's saying, but there may have been a woman with him. When Sam told Forrest he was going there, he told him that his wife may be coming with him. Ultimately, she did. Right? So he was the man. He was the first man to figure out where warm water salt, basically, which was at the wheel. In your imagination, the physical place is Five Springs Basin. He says the most common mistake that I see searchers make is that they underestimate the importance of the first clue. If you don't have that one nailed down, you might as well stay home and play canasta. And incidentally, the canasta is a hint too. I'll let you figure that one out. So basically, he just keeps iterating over and over how important figuring out the first clue is. And nobody was doing that. What everybody was doing was they were doing exactly what Cal Lazar said. And I did the same thing too back before I learned all of this stuff after 2017. I would read the clues, and then I would locate a map, and I would try to find a place where warm water salt. The problem that I realized by 2017 is you can't do that, because if you ask 10 different people what they think warm water salt means, they're all going to come up with 10 different answers. And that right there is the problem. We want to know what the poem is telling us. Because some people might think warm water salt's at Warm Springs up by Du Bois, like I did back in 2016. Or they might think it halts, in the sink at Lander. Or they might think that it halts at Flaming Gorge. Or they might think Madison Junction. Or they might think yada, yada, on and on. Geyser Basin, Firehole River. And that's another thing, like I said, the Firehole River and Madison Junction can easily be ruled out because you cannot duplicate those places south of Santa Fe, New Mexico. And according to Forrest Fenn, there is at least one place south of Santa Fe in New Mexico where warm waters would halt. And there are no geysers in New Mexico, so it's zero chance that that's the clue. But again, Forrest also mentions those places. He mentions Ojo Caliente, where he bathed on the Firehole River. He mentions Madison Junction. He mentions 9 Mile Hole. He mentions West Yellowstone. He mentions Hebgen Lake. He mentions Fishing Bridge. You see what I mean here? So those are not subtle clues. So we have so much stuff going against that. What you have to do is do what he's saying here and use the poem to solve where warm water salt. Once you nail that down, the poem becomes extremely straightforward, as I showed in our solve. Once you know you got to go to the wheel, all you got to do is follow the D and the E cards, the E and D, and it takes you right to the place for warm water salt, and then it takes you directly to where you got to put in, and it ends at Rainbow Canyon, and it passes over where the intersection is that you have to leave the trail to the falls to go to campsite number 9 to retrieve the chest. And that campsite number 9 is a double omega right next to the campsite, formed by two trees that naturally grown into the shape of upside down omegas. Then above the nook, right when you sight through those omegas, the nook on the ground, which incidentally looks like an eye. If you look at the shadows of it, it looks like an eye looking back at you. There's an omega that grew, and it's a tree at a 90-degree angle. It bent, and it forms an omega right over the chest. That tree, one of the arms of the omega, was cut off, and it's laying on the ground next to it. Now, if you took a drone, because you can't see it on Google Earth, it's too high up. But if you take a drone and fly it over that spot, even in the summer, there's an opening in the tree canopy, and you could kind of see that omega. But again, like I said, now it's destroyed, so you wouldn't be able to make it out because one half of it's gone. Okay, you'd have to physically go there to see that and notice that fact. But you could look down through the trees, right through the omega that's laying on its side, and beneath it is where the treasure chest was. So essentially, there's a third omega. Omega number 1 is using the poem to solve where warm water salt. Omega number 2 is using the poem along with the location where warm water salt to locate where the treasure chest is. And then omega number 3 is, of course, when you get to the treasure chest, it's sitting at the end of 2 omegas beneath a third omega. And all of them are synonymous with ending and ceasing. Omega means end of the series, to cease, to halt. All of that stuff is the end. So it is very straightforward. The problem is figuring out where warm water salt is not that easy. You don't manipulate the poem. You don't change the words. You don't remove the spacing. But there's a lot of thought behind it. You don't need to be an English major, but it does rely on you looking things up and understanding. And Forrest even told you that. He said, how many people understand, what does the word several mean? And then he explained it. Well, he was kind of hinting at the fact that you really need to pay attention to what's going on. And then that other guy, Phil, that talked about changing words and stuff like that. He said, are all the words in the poem important? And then Forrest Fenn, and I'm paraphrasing here, said to him, yeah, Phil, you shouldn't discount any word. So what he's talking about there is you got to pay attention to the meaning of the phrases and the clauses and what exactly he's saying there. If you understand that and get rid of gold fever, throw the chest out of your mind, you're only looking at the poem. And if you think about your algebra days at school, X is a variable. It's meant to hold a number. It's a placeholder. Well, that's exactly what a pronoun is. So a pronoun like it is a placeholder for a noun. The same thing is with there and where, right? I mean, they're placeholders. Don't take the time to do that. And you got gold fever like I did before 2017, before I took it serious. I jump right to a map because I'm like, hey, this is easy. Let me just go find it. And I'll find a canyon that's near where my World Wonder halts are, and I'll force the poem to fit that area. And you guys know now that it was 10 years and we done that. We done it tired. We're weak. It failed. You cannot go to a map. You have to solve where one Wonder halts. Let me take another look at the poem, and I'm going to give you some points that you can dwell on over Thanksgiving. I want to briefly discuss a couple of things here. You read the poem, and you're going to use the first part of reading it is you're going to break it down into phrases and understand the rhyme scheme. Understand, like I said, this here, every sentence has to have what they call an independent clause. And an independent clause is the part that stands on its own. Every sentence has to have that. So the first thing you do is you break down the poem to find out where the verbs are. And then you use the verbs to find out the subjects. And then when you got the subject and the verb, you find any direct objects, which is the object that the verb is operating on, so on and so forth. And that's how you break the poem down grammatically. That is a sentence on its own. You can forget about everything, begin it. And it's what they call an imperative. Okay, so like if I was at a racetrack and everybody was on the line ready to go, and I shot the gun and I said, go. That's a whole sentence, just the word go. It has an implied you in front of it. Whoever I'm talking to is the subject. The speaker of the poem is talking to us. Now, take it in the Canyon Down is not an imperative. Because if you break this down, you'll see, as I've been pointing out, that let me do this in a different color. This here is a dependent clause. And this, it's being used as a subordinating conjunction. That's what makes this dependent, because it's subordinate. So this and conjunction is tying the two verbs halt and take together. And every clause, even if it's dependent, has to have a subject and a verb, at least one verb. Here we got a compound verb, halt and take. So, but the subject is waters, actually. Warm is an adjective telling you what kind of water. So we have warm waters. That's the subject. This is the verb. Now, whenever you have a compound verb like that, you don't have to repeat the subject. So the subject is understood to be warm waters. So the warm waters are going to halt and take it in the Canyon Down. And it's not far, but too far to walk is telling you how far it's going to take it. It's going to take it to the point that we're able to walk from. And that brings up the point of infinitives. The word to is actually can be an infinitive or it can be a preposition. So you got to determine if it's followed by a noun or not. In this case, it's followed by a verb in its base form. So whenever to is followed by a verb, it's considered what they call an infinitive. So even though walk is a verb, the phrase to walk is acting as a noun. So this is telling you not far, but it's too far to walk, meaning that he's going to take us to a place that we can perform the action of walking. Well, we have three of those, and I'm not going to explain all of these. You can figure it out for yourself, but it's pretty obvious once you understand that. So we have to walk, to cease, and to seek. Now, the rhyme scheme, as I set out, every stanza rhymes with itself. A rhymes with A, So we have A, B, A, B, local to the stanza itself. We got A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B. But that's not really the way you're supposed to figure out a rhyme scheme. What you do is you start out with the first word and you say there, okay, are there any words up to this point that rhyme with there? No. So we give it the letter A. Now we get to bold. Are there any words that rhyme with bold up to this point? No. So we give it the letter B. We get to where. Are there any words up to this point that rhyme with where? Yeah, there rhymes with where. So we give it an A because the letter already exists. A, B. Same thing with old. B, B. Now we get down to halt. Are there any words up here that rhyme with halt? No. So that becomes C. Are there any words before down? No. D. Any words before walk? Yeah, halt. So that becomes C again. So we got CD, CD. That's basically how it works. But you'll notice when we get down to seek, are there any words that rhyme with seek prior to here? Yeah, there is. Meek. So whatever letter we use for meek and creek is the same letter for seek and weak. Okay, because he's rhyming globally. Now remember, at the end of the poem, he's saying, "So hear me all and listen good." He's referring to listening to the poem. And when you're listening to a poem, you're listening to it like music. So the rhyme scheme kind of gives it a rhythm or a meter. So you got, as I have gone alone in there and with my treasures bold, I can keep my secret where and hint of riches new and old. So that's what he's telling you to do. Listen good, right? And hear me all, I'll get to in a minute. So that's how the rhyme scheme works. And of course, when we get down to cold, cold rhymes with bold and old. So it's going to take the same letter. The only time we see a back reference like that is this stanza is back to this stanza, and this stanza's going all the way back to the first stanza. You'll notice that I made there, where, and there all yellow. That's because they also rhyme. There, where, there. Okay. So you might say, but Troy, why didn't you pick this there? Because that's their will. Well, for two reasons. One, it's a contraction. Second of all, and more importantly, this is not being used to discuss a position. This is talking about a position from there. This is talking about a position. It's telling you where to begin it. This is telling you about a position. This is telling you about a position. This is what they would call an existential there, or it's also used as a dummy subject, like a place builder. And usually it's followed by a verb form, what they call to be. So we have there, will be, which is a be form, or we would use it with is, which is also a be form. It's a state. It's not an action verb. You don't do an action of a be, and you don't do an action of is. That's basically being used to define the state of the subject. So this is dummy subject here. This is not talking about a position. Like I can tell you, there is a God. That doesn't mean that I'm saying God's at this position. I'm just telling you that it exists. God exists. Look at it that way. That's what existential means. Exists. And it matches here because he's saying there will be no paddle up your creek. So we don't pay attention to that there. So when you're looking at rhyming words, and you could do this over the holiday, consider that we have there, where, there. And there's a reason for that. Boy, I got a little bit off on a tangent there, is the dependent clause. So this entire thing in purple is telling you it's all referring to, it's using three different places, but they're all referring to the starting point. They're all referring back. He's telling you where to begin it. Well, you begin it where warm water salt and take it in the canyon down. Not far, but too far to walk. That's where you begin it. He's not saying begin it where warm water salt, period. And then go, you take it in the canyon down, period. Not far, but too far to walk. Take 2 steps to the left. That's not what he's doing. He's giving you only one directive here. Begin it. He's giving you, it's an imperative. Begin it. This verb and this verb are talking about the warm waters. Over here, in this dependent clause, the subject is you. It's not shown, but it's implied. You. Like I said, ask a 10-year-old what an imperative is and what a command is. How they would understand that, right? So in this stanza, we have an imperative, and then we have an imperative here. He's telling you to put in below the home brown. So he's only telling you to do two things. That's it. He's not telling you to do four. There are four clues: one, two, three, four. But he's not telling you to do four separate things. He's giving you a position, but he's not telling you to go there. He's telling you to begin it there. Then he's saying put in below the home of brown. So that right there, you don't even need to know what the home of brown means. It does have a meaning in the poem, and I explained that. The home of brown is actually the entire protected area of the wheel. It doesn't have to be capital because it's a proper noun. When you're looking at English, ask a child again, what is another case where you would capitalize a letter? Did you know that you capitalize a proper adjective? Because if this represents a group, if this is an adjective describing a group, you would capitalize the adjective. You understand what I'm saying? It's not a color brown. It's not a person brown. It's a group. It represents a group. And the home is the origin of that group. But anyhow, he's basically telling you here that this is the home of brown. But we're not going to go in there. We're going to put in below it. So everything below here, he's instructing you on this line to put in below. So if we're going to follow his footsteps and go alone in there, there, this is the only other place that there is referring to a position. There is no other there anywhere near or aware. And like I said, look at the rhyme scheme. And remember, he said, so hear me all and listen good. Now, I'm going to get to that in a second, but we got there, where. So obviously, this where and this there is where he keeps his secret. And this where is going to be answered in here once we solve the poem. So we're going to locate his secret, which then, like algebra, fills in the variable where. And we now know that the wheel is where we're going to begin it. So when we read the poem, we take all of this information is pointing to these locations that are clues at that position. But we're still not going there. And these two lines down here are clearly descriptive. They're adjectorial. You can just tell that by reading it. From there, it is he's describing it. He's saying it is no place for the meek. Well, you'll notice in it, begin it, take it, right? Well, here's it again. So he's describing from below to Homer Brown, you're looking back to Homer Brown, and he's describing what you need to do at the wheel. So all of this stuff here in the blue is basically related to this. Now, this existential there, he's telling us what's going to exist in our future. So this stuff is what we're going to do and what we're going to expect. But what I want you to do over the holidays, like I said, pay attention to the rhyme scheme. And I'm going to show you that now after I show the next screen that actually has this solved. I did what the poem told me. So now we read the poem again. Forget about this shifted part for a minute. I didn't change anything. I added some more color so that you could see the blaze. The blaze is the end, the end. You're going to stop reading because you're not going to read beyond the word the because it ends. And when you're reading vertically, you're only going to read to here because the very next word is it ends. That's the blaze. So the blaze is stopping you up here. Just like where warm water salt is stopping you here. And just like our last clue is right here, the word cease. We're done. The end of the clues. The clues are all here, right after each other. And that's it. You've ceased. You've ended. When you're reading the message, you've ended. You can clearly see in red here, the, end. Does a double cross That's the blaze in the poem. So we're looking quickly down from the blaze. We're going to see, and remember, we're only reading the words that overlap the word the. After that, we're going to end. We're not going to read beyond the end. So that's why we're only picking these words in this column. So we have try the wheel, from the W down to L, wheel. Everything above here is the home of Brown. But we didn't get the instruction to put in until this line. That's why we're putting in the R in this line. We're putting that R in this column. And again, we're not taking the first one, we're taking the second one. So from there, blah, blah, blah. You've seen the solve, you know how that works. Try the wheel end. But when you read it this way, it's the end. But read it vertically. Try the wheel. END. There's a gap here. So you're going to have a pause. There's a comma here. Try the wheel. END. The currents at the wheel on the outside of the wheel are labeled from going clockwise. When you enter the wheel, it's A, Aldebaran, B, Rigel. Next to C is Sirius. D, Bahamut. This is the water Karn. E, this is the sun rise at solstice. We're looking away from the sun, not to it. But we got 5 letters here. Keep that in mind for a hint. We got A, B, C, D, E. If this is north and we're going clockwise around the wheel, we're going to go A, B, C, D. The D points down to warm water salt. E, sunrise. We're looking away from the sun. The end is ever drawing nigh because this is kind of like a sundial. The sun rises, and then it goes all the way around twice, and then it sets. Then the next day, the sun rises, then it goes around and sets, rises, sets. It's ever drawing nigh. A wheel is ever drawing nigh, kind of like a tire or a circle. The E and the D, actually, the E is the very last kern. So we go from A, B, C, D, E. And then there's an F over here, but F is inside the circle. That's where the Vision Quest person would sit. And then you have O, which is the center point of the wheel. So those don't count. They're not on the outer rim. So we got A, B, C, D, E, A, B, C, D, E, A, B, C, D, E. So constantly it's ever drawing nigh. But remember, we're hitting the ends here. So he's telling us to stop at the E, to stop at the D, right here. Figure this out using the poem. I'm not going to get into that much detail. What I'm telling you here is more than enough information for you to realize what's going on here. So, like I said, whenever we get down here, it is referring back up to here. But he's explaining it looking back from the position below the home of Brown. Now you'll notice that you don't see it until down here again. But these two its are actually referring to the same kind of the same way. They're referring back. But this time they're not going exactly back up to here because of the word seek is taking you back up to meek, which is where we have it again. So the seek and the weak, okay, when you've done it tired at the wheel and now you're weak, you're going to seek the campsite. Let's put it that way. So these its are talking about now from below the home of Brown, but they're referring back. They're pronouns again. And by definition, the pronoun refers to something that you should already know. It was recently discussed. So this it is referring back to the same it as this. So both of these its and this it is defined in here to be the word treasures. The first time we're going through the poem. Second time, we're at the wheel, so it's different. But when you get down here, this one is referring to stuff that you've got up here. And he's telling you that here. This is also where he gives you the state. And I'm going to show you that in just a second. So that's how this works. Now look at the word it. It appears in the poem 5 times. Now remember, everything in my solve is related to 5 springs. Warm water salt and 5 springs basin. It forms Five Sinks Creek. The first canyon that the Ecairn or the sun hits is named the same thing, Five Springs Canyon. Then it continues down, it goes over Five Springs Falls, and it goes over Five Springs Campsite. So you got a basin, a creek, a canyon, a falls, and a campsite. It's five of them. It's another hint to five. Here is where it gets interesting. And I explained this to you guys, but I don't really think that you understood it. I really explained this well to Justin and Michelle, and they understand it now. And they're like, oh my God, it's that easy. And they're like, I can't believe other people don't see this. And I'm like, yeah, tell me about it. But that kind of explains, like Forrest Fenn said, when you find out where it is, you're going to be amazed how easy it was. You're going to say, why didn't I think of that? Well, that's the same thing I'm thinking. And I'm kicking myself in the butt because I knew this. I was off by one thing and I found that one thing out. But it was not until June 8th, 2020. So Jack beat us by 2 days and I'm kicking myself in the butt. Tough luck for me. I mean, I didn't get the chance. But yeah, it seems so obvious now. But people are not thinking. They're being stubborn or they're so biased on their solve. They're afraid to do what I did in 2017, throw it away. So far to date, nobody has accepted my challenge. Nobody has went over the poem in its detail and backed up their solve. Nobody. And I'm telling you, they can't do it. Contrary to what people like Dave would say, there is no alternative solve. There's one solve. Now, technically, everybody has a solve, and that leads to their favorite place. Forrest Fenn had a solve, and his leads to the treasure chest. Only his solve. And there can only be one way to get to the chest, and I'm showing you that way. It's all entirely based on the poem and the wheel. I'm not involving the book or any of the hints that we're now discussing because this is the fun time. The poem's solved, it's done. But now that you understand how the poem works, you're going to find it a lot easier in the book to locate the hints. And believe me, you're going to find hundreds of them. First time you read the poem, before we slid these lines, somebody's going to say, but how did you know to take the word treasures and do what you did? And he's telling you right here how to do that. Like I said, he's giving you title to the gold, which is referring back to hint of riches new and old, which is referring back to treasures, which is bold. So there is no doubt that the word treasures is the word that is key. So since we don't have the treasure chest, we want to follow Forrest's footsteps. We want to take the word treasures alone in there, which is here. So we want to begin spelling it down. And we're choosing each word based on what the poem told us in the past. So from there, it's no place for the meek. Well, the end is no place for the meek. Over here, he's saying in our future, there's not going to be any paddling up a creek. So we're moving that out of the treasure column because he don't want you to take the letter A from paddle. I mean, it's straightforward. And we're not choosing the first R, the second R. We're not choosing the first D, we're choosing the second E. We're not choosing the first A, we're choosing the second A for treasure. But when you get down here, he's no longer telling you to move anything. He's asking you about the blaze, which is the end. The end. That's the blaze in the poem. And he's telling you, look quickly down, which is when you're going to see try the wheel. And then you're only going to do it until you cease, until your quest cease, right? So now when we're reading the poem, we get down here, all of this is hints. But the most important part is saying, so hear me all. When a writer is discussing themselves, they're going to use the word I whenever they are the subject. And they're the ones performing the action. I have gone. I can keep. I must go. I already know. And I've done it tired. I am weak. I give you. So you see, though he's the subject, and what he's giving you, he's performing an act of giving, and he's giving it to you. You're the indirect object. What is he giving you? The title to the goal. That's how you read the English. So when he's saying, so hear me all, what he's telling you, he's using himself. Instead of using I, use me. Whenever you're the object of the verb. So he's saying, so hear me. So now the speaker becomes the object of the verb, hear me. And notice again, I'm just going to point this out. We have all. We have all. But also, what he's talking about is hear me all. He's telling you to go back and read the words that he spoke that have I in it. Those 5 times is an I appears in the poem. If you don't, remember, it's alone. These are not alone. This is technically contraction. I have. Okay. I am. Am is the verb. Have is a helper verb. I have done. I am is a state of being. And this is an adjective. I am weak. Okay. So technically, if you drop these 2 off, because there's a total of 7 I's, there's really only 5 of them that are standing on their own. That's another hint to the number 5 here. So I'm not gonna get precise about this. I want you guys to have fun with it and do it. I already know how it works, but I'm kind of gonna give you a jump start here. Let's go back because he's telling us to do it here. He's saying, so hear me all and listen good. What he's telling us to do is pay attention to the poem. And we're going to listen to the rhyme scheme, which means that we're going to go to every place where he is. In other words, every I that's alone in the poem. And we're going to read those lines. And we're only going to read those lines in order. Because remember, we're getting hints at this point. We're solving the poem. We're not boots on the ground. So we have, as I have gone alone in there, I can keep my secret where. So why is it that I must go? Now remember, he's gone. Why is it that I must go? The answer is I already know. He's telling you right there that the answer, he's referring back to the lines there and where. Why is it that I must go? And he's telling you the answers I already know. We know the answers right here as we get to the point. So we know the answer where there is. There is the wheel. So this entire thing now becomes the wheel. Begin it at the wheel. And that's where you're going to use the END, because when you're reading down, try the wheel, END. So he's telling you just these. Try the wheel, END, to solve where warm water's halt. So in other words, if we come out on the D at the wheel, okay, I'm just gonna draw it here. The D, Karen, from the wheel is gonna point to Five Springs Basin. The E, which is roughly 8 o'clock, is gonna if you stood here and look that way, you're gonna see the sunrise. But if you look quickly down from the sunrise and you took that same line down, it's going to enter the canyon over here. And then it's going to go down to the point that you need to walk to, which is where the chest is. And then it's going to go down to the place where you put in at the crossroads that lead back up to where the chest is. What he's doing, like I said, is he's getting you from the wheel down here and bringing you back up. And you can verify that because he's saying, take it in the canyon down. But we never left the canyon. He's not telling you to take it to the entrance of the canyon because he would said, take it to the canyon down. In other words, he would say, take it to the entrance of the canyon down. And he's not saying take it below the canyon. He's telling you to put in below the home of Brown, of he defined. So we're going down. This area is the home of Brown to a lower altitude to the basin, and we're going to go in here and head back up. Remember, you said me in the middle. Well, he's in the middle at campsite number 9. It's roughly halfway between the wheel and the put-in point, roughly. And then when you're on the trail, he's telling you that the trail is ever drawing nigh. There'll be just heavy loads of water high. You're not going to go all the way to the waterfall, but that's the name of the trail. Right here, it says go this way, drive this way to get to Five Springs Falls Campground. And then it says warning, dangerous roads, blah, blah, blah. There's falling rocks, and it's going to take you to a waterfall. That's heavy loads of water high. When you get there and you park and you go to the sign, it says, follow this trail to the Five Springs Falls. Beware of falling rocks. So there's your heavy loads and water high again. But then you're going to get to a certain point right by campsite number 9 where it says the trail is not maintained beyond this point. You're at your own risk and stuff. So it's no place for the meek, right? But that's where you're supposed to turn off and go into campsite number 9, and you're going right to the chest. Now remember, the sun crosses over near the trail, right where you would get off of the path. And up here, pretty close down here, there's a bench where you would tarry scant if you're resting. And then right here, like I said, is the campsite closest to the waterfalls that are over here. So we're reading everything, only what he wrote, and he's saying it there. I have gone alone in there. I can keep my secret where? Yeah, I'm skipping the other 2 lines because I is not on those lines. As I have gone alone in there, I can keep my secret where? So why is it that I must go? The answer is I already know. And then, of course, we already read the line that said, so hear me all and listen good. So he's telling us, I give you title to the gold. That's what's referring back up to riches new and old and treasures bold. So we've proven that we have the title. So now that we have the title, let's take it to the treasure. We have access to the chest. He gave us the title. So now we'll take treasures in there so that we could find out where is. And we end up with try to wield. Well, that's basically how it works. And you can continue it from there. You can even come back and read. And with my treasures bold, I'm going to hint the riches new and old. So it's telling you there when you're reading every other line. This time you're reading based on, you're doing the listen good. You're only reading rhyming words. Hint the riches new and old is the same thing as title to the gold. So the title to the gold is in the hint of the riches new and old. But you're jumping up around like that because that's the way the rhyme scheme jumps. And then when you're reading down here and leave my trail for all to seek, we're seeking that a place near, no place for the meek. And I have done it tired, and now I'm weak, is where you would go to tarry scant with the marvel gaze. That's what's taking you to the campsite. So it's very, very straightforward. And, and you can even see it here, like I pointed out down here. I must go there. I already know where. That's that's reading the poem. Up here, this is a sentence on its own. Begin it. Put in. That's a verbal phrase. This is not acting as a preposition. It's part of a verb. It's verbal. Put in, put out, put down, and it's another imperative. Well, when we go down here, we got the same condition. This is a sentence on its own. So why is it? I'm asking somebody a question. So why is it? So I'm expecting you to give me the answer to fill in this variable it. Now remember, that goes back up here. This is a rhetorical question. Forrest Fenn answers it right here. So this is referring back to where you're going to be going to. This is all very straightforward. So why is it stands on its own. So now the word that is another subordinating conjunction. And the dependent part would be this, that I must go and leave my trail for all to seek. Obviously, that's not a sentence on its own. It's got to work with the independent clause. So he's telling you here, so why is it? Remember, so hear me all. Listen at the rhyme. So why is it? The H is silent. So clearly, why is there? And he's giving you the state. And that's where the wheel is. I said he's using the rhymes scheme back in the poem. But when you're looking at rhymes, don't just look at the end. Look in the poem. There, where. And even though this is existential, you can look at that there too, because it doesn't matter. This is an adjective. These are adjective phrases. This is telling you a description of what it's going to look like in the direction you go. This is where you came from. This is where you're going to. So these 2 clues are describing where you're going to. These two clues are describing the home of Brown. The home of Brown is defined here to be everything above it. The word it is not the quest. It is something that you should already know. And when we read the poem and studied it, we know it is treasures. There you go. So have a good time with this, folks. Like I said, play around with it. Look at the rhyme scheme and really look. Let me load this up again so that you have a clean copy of it to look at. And remember, an omega means the end, cease, halt. So there you go if you want to take a shot of it, just to be able to take a screenshot of this and look at what I'm talking about. Just print it out. If you have a color printer, you might want to invert it because what's going to happen is it's going to print all this black and blow your ink. So revert it so that it's black on white instead of white on black. But look and pay attention to the words that rhyme. I didn't highlight everything in here. I'm leaving some of the work to you. I'm not going to explain everything, But if you watch my whole series, you kind of will get the gist of it. Like I didn't go over Terry Scanlon Marble Gaze because you already know that. And when you're looking at the word in, it's prepositional phrases, in peace, in the wood, in there, keep in mind that this go in peace is actually also what they call an idiom. It's a phrase. Go in peace when you leave church. Go in peace. Peace be with you. Since the wheel is a sacred place, when you leave it, you're going to be going in peace. And remember that treasures are not just material things, they can be memories when you're looking at the book. And treasures are also historical sites, those are part of our national treasures. So you could think of leaving the wheel as leaving your trove. And we're seeking the trove, which is the wheel, to find out where one wanders halt. You got to forget about the gold. You got to look at the poem. The very last step is the gold. That's the easy part. Boots on the ground is the easy part. Figuring out where to go boots on the ground, that's a whole nother story. It's not straightforward unless you took the time to understand the poem. Then it's very straightforward because there's nothing at all complicated about this and nothing's been modified. There's no ciphers. And this is absolutely not a coincidence because the poem told me exactly what to do, and I proved that to you now. But a lot of people think, well, no, I just go to a map. Well, yeah, of course, that's easier. That's the easy route. That's what everybody does. But it's also wrong. And like I said, it's wrong because you're finding your special place. You're going to your where Marmot Salt. You're not going to Fenn's. And if you try to locate Fenn's place by using the books, you're using hints. You're not using the poem. Stick to the poem. And if he named the place in the book, that's not subtle. So you can ignore it. So forget about Ojo Caliente. And the poem is written in English, not Spanish. So Agua Fria has nothing to do with it. And of course, now Eagle's Nest and all, we know for a fact because Forrest Fenn in August of 2020 filed a legal petition with the court under oath. And he did that because his wife was sick. He couldn't go to court. And he doesn't say, and he specifically says, I left the treasure was where I left it in the state of Wyoming. And he actually mentions the year back in 2010. There's nothing about that, you'll notice that a lot of people refer to what he posted on Dallas. We decided to tell you it was in Wyoming. Well, forget about that. Forrest Fenn in a legal document said it was in the state of Wyoming where I left it back in 2010, clearly and under oath. Does that mean Forrest told the truth? No, of course not. But if you think that the poem was not in Wyoming, you're essentially saying you don't trust Forrest Fenn. That's fine. You're saying Forrest Fenn committed perjury. That's fine too. You're entitled to your opinion. But why don't you just come out and say it? I think Forrest Fenn perjured himself. I think he lied and the treasure chest was not there. And also use your real name when you're saying it. Have some guts. This way somebody could sue you for what you're doing. Back it up. Back it up. It's, creating a fake name and going out there and saying you did that is wrong. are shouting out there that it's wrong. You're not backing it up. And also, you look like a hypocrite because you trusted Forrest Fenn enough to believe he actually hit a treasure chest, right? But because your solve is in the wrong state, well, he lied about that. He didn't lie about the chest. He just lied about the state because he doesn't want anyone to know. Yeah, I'm sure Forrest Fenn, okay, I'm just going to pull numbers out. Let's say 50 million, right? Let's say his estate's worth 50 million once everything is sold after appraisal, right? He's going to risk $50 million to, number one, hide it in an illegal place like Yellowstone, where he would be charged for each and every rescue and death. Guaranteed. And you have to bring the chest to the superintendent. If you don't, they're going to confiscate it from you. And Forrest Fenn is not going to risk $50 million for $1 million. He's not going to do that. He's not an idiot. So why on earth would he go to court and give them a document under oath and say, oh, yeah, it was in Wyoming, but it really wasn't. I lied. Why? Why would he do that? You know, you just got to move on with life. You were off. You were not even within 600 miles of the treasure chest. Sorry. You know, maybe, and it's okay. Maybe treasure hunting is not your gig. It's a tough pill to swallow, but that's okay. There are other things to do. I mean, a great thing to do would be the storage chest gig like Cow and K-Pro are doing. That's awesome. I commend them for that. That's so cool. Their audience is going to love watching them open up these storage units before knowing what's in there. That is cool stuff. That has nothing to do with Ben. I give them props. I hope they have a lot of success in that. But everybody should do something like that. If you failed to find the chest, that's okay. Treasure hunting is not your gig. Move on to something else. Move on to something easy. You just go ahead and break out a couple $100, buy a storage unit, and it's like rolling the dice. And you could make some serious cash. I used to like watching Storage Wars and all them other shows about opening containers like that. And it's cool. It's cool. I don't have the guts to do it. I don't have the cash to go out and buy the units. But what I could do over here is, go to estate sales. A lot of old people in Florida are dying all the time. There's estate sales every day. It's warm all year. The garage sales and yard sales and so on. And there's a lot of old people that have a lot of old, interesting things for sale. You buy it, appraise it, clean it up, flip it on eBay or whatever, and you could make quite a bit of money. And if you video all of that, it's really cool, you know. So anyway, folks, I hope you all have a great Thanksgiving, and just don't complain to me that you're going to be eating leftovers for about a week, but enjoy what you had, and that's pretty much it. Peace.